Live from Rome, this is the Twilight Show with Freya Odell on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
The Twilight Show with me, Freya Odell. In tonight's show, we'll be discussing our experienced teachers. Just how do we keep our experts passionate and engaged in the profession? It is finally the Twilight Show with me, Freya Odell, on Teachers Talk Radio. And as you can tell, we are live.
Live from Rome, this is the Twilight Show with Freya Odell on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
Right, fantastic. I feel like we can begin now. We've done the heading straight off. Now that my mic is back working, I'm not quite sure what happened there, but apologies for that dodgy start. It has nothing to do with the fact that I am hungover today at all. We are going to be talking experienced teachers today. We're going to be talking experienced teachers, something that obviously I feel I know a bit about. I'm 20 years into the profession now, and I'm so delighted to be joined by my first guest this evening, who actually needs no introduction, Mr. David Weston, CEO of the Teacher Development Trust. I have been so lucky to see David speak on a few occasions. It is an absolute pleasure to listen to David speak. And even pre-COVID, which seems like a long time ago now, had the pleasure of inviting him to Research Ed Rome and our very quirky first ever Research Ed for Italy. David, welcome.
Thank you so much, Freya, for having me. And can I just say, it was so epically exciting. I remember going to do Research Ed in Rome, and it was touch and go, I'll be honest, because I was so sick. I remember when I flew over. And nowadays, of course, the thought of flying over with like a cold or a cough or anything like that is horrendous, isn't it? But yeah, I flew over and I did the talk, and then I kind of collapsed for 24 hours. But then when I woke up the following day, I felt so much better, and I had this glorious walk around Rome, and there was gelato, and it was just perfection. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk at your amazing event. And it is very exciting to be here this evening.
Oh, thank you. But we have to mention that you were so incredibly resilient, because we also had problems with the planes, didn't we? It was like everything that could go wrong went wrong, but we got there in the end.
We did, and eventually there was gelato. So that really, ultimately, it all ended well for the best, you know?
All is well if we have gelato. Now, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I absolutely love talking to you, and I always learn so much from you. I always give a very, very brief introduction. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career to date.
Yes, I'm very happy to. So my background was, after doing a degree in engineering, I taught for 10 years, and I was teaching. Initially, I did my teacher experience, my PGCE, in a really fascinating school, which has now been taken over a couple of times at least, which was in Banbury in Oxfordshire. And it was sort of one of these huge super schools that had over 2,000 children, and it was in special measures. And it was quite the baptism of fire, it has to be said, doing my PGCE there, which you could in those days. You can do that now. And I went on then to work at some very contrasting schools. One was Watford Boys, and I put it in quotes, grammar school in Watford, and then Camden School for Girls. So some really, really different schools. And over 10 years of teaching, at some points I was full-time, some points I was part-time teaching, because in the days I wasn't doing school teaching, I was doing dance teaching for ballroom dancing. So that all went on, and then during that time, had some really very exotic illness and got very ill, and then recovered, and a new lease of life, and suddenly got massively into Twitter, which I joined, and geeked out enormously over all of this research I never knew existed. And suddenly started meeting people, and I would DM people and say, let's have coffee, you sound really exciting. And half of the people at least didn't think I was weird and said yes. And through a number of conversations, I had a very fateful conversation with a wonderful person called Mark McCourt, who became the chair of the Teacher Development Trust when we started up, because he said, look, you're so interested in teacher development. Why don't you start a charity that's really focused on trying to make teacher CPD better? And I did. And the rest, as they say, is history. So back in 2012, while I was still teaching, started setting the charity up. And it just sort of took off, and everyone was so interested in talking about teacher CPD. So for the last, 9 years, that's what I've been doing, and working with schools across the country, occasionally internationally, to try and make schools the sorts of places where teachers can thrive professionally and personally. They can access the best wisdom and use that to teach all the children in front of them, and where all of us can collectively use our professional endeavors as a profession to help children succeed. So that's where I find myself now, CEO for an amazing 9 years of the Teacher Development Trust.
And what I really love when I am fortunate enough to listen to you speak, and hopefully will, be able to listen to you speak live again very, very soon, is your absolute expertise with regard to teacher development. So if we're thinking about our experienced teachers today, what do we already know about teacher longevity in the profession or teacher progression within the profession?
Well, it's such a fascinating area. And honestly, with all of these things, I've started describing myself as joyfully nerdy. That has become a hashtag within the organization now, and people are demanding mugs. But the idea that actually there's always so much to learn, and you can dive more and more into any area, whether it's teacher development, teacher progression, expertise, anything, you can just keep diving more and more into the literature, and it never stops getting fascinating. And I, I hope I never stop doing that. So when it comes to teacher development, teacher progression, well, there's all sorts of interesting facts about this. First of all, it's really well established now that what you see with teachers is that when it comes to teachers' impact on children, we tend to grow that most rapidly in the first 2 to 3 years. And by somewhere between 3 to 5 years, then on average, teachers tend to slow down significantly their rate of improvement. And that's their rate of improvement in terms of the average impact on young people. Now, that, of course, never stops us from constantly having to learn about new specifications and new challenges and how to teach online when there's a pandemic and how to deal with this particular set of challenges or this incredibly capable child with capabilities we've never dealt with. But in terms of that overall effectiveness, we find there is this slowdown. Now, some studies suggest it's a plateau. Some studies suggest, well, it's only a plateau if you're in the wrong sort of school. And this is the area that particularly fascinates me, that a number of studies then suggest that depending on the type of school you're in and the sort of working conditions and culture, you either then continue to progress in terms of getting better and better, or you're more likely to be the sort of school where teachers on average kind of plateau and stop getting better. Now, all of this hides loads of variation. Of course, some people get have a year where they get better. Some people have a tough year and they don't do quite as well. So we're looking at averages right across the profession, and within even any school, you've got people bumping up and down and changing. But average it all out, and in general, we can keep improving, but there is this kind of change at about 3 to 5 years. And I reckon anyone listening who's been teaching perhaps more than 5 years will recognize the difference in feeling between years 1, 2, and 3 in teaching, where every year is like, oh, wow, I feel so much more capable than last year, and wow, this stuff feels less new. And then somewhere between 3 and 5, where you just think, okay, I've kind of got it now, and there's just tweaks. Does that seem familiar to you, Freya?
Yeah, definitely. I think what I think about with myself more than anything is that actually you get to a stage where you do feel like you can teach pretty well. And I'm not saying that from an arrogant perspective, but I feel like I know my subject well, and I know the teaching well because I've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
What I find fascinating is just trying to remember perhaps that there is more to learn and consider some of the avenues perhaps that don't involve leadership. And I think that's something that's really, really interesting, isn't it? That more and more, I would say, experienced teachers actually are less interested in leadership now, but want something else instead.
Absolutely. And this is, so I remember 10 years ago when I did a bit of a dive into what was happening in Singapore. And I just got blown away really by the fact that in Singapore, teachers could progress as generalists, or they could progress as specialists, or they could progress along a leadership track. And you could choose the sort of the track you were interested in, as in I want to continue to develop myself as a classroom practitioner, or I want to develop a specialism, maybe around special educational needs or curriculum or something like that, or develop in the kind of the management and leadership. And you didn't necessarily get stuck in one track. You could jump over from one to the other, but there was that sort of picture. And I've been really fortunate to be invited to occasionally give advice to the DFE. I don't know that they always listen to it. I don't know if it's always good advice, but I do my very best. I remember back in 2014, 15, 16, there was a lot of discussion around, look, we have to do something for the vast majority of teachers who don't want to become senior leaders, head teachers, and so on. It's all very well to say, yes, we need to invest in our senior leaders, but it's not for everyone. And there was a long conversation about, well, what could we do that doesn't just do that dreadful thing of saying, oh, Singapore does it, let's just import it, but say, well, what would work for us? And that thread of thinking ended up to where we are now by saying, well, the first progression for many teachers that they think about is perhaps to a sort of a middle leader role, head of subject, head of year, head of phase, head of a specialism, or taking on a TLR, as it would be in the UK or in England in particular, to a responsibility for one area. And let's try and sort of, rather than have a generic you progress and you are a middle leader, and this NPQ, National Professional Qualification in Middle Leadership, let's split that and let's identify 3 pathways that people might want to progress along. And one of them is developing along the line of leading teaching. So that's anything from leading a team of teachers in a phase, or even more likely a subject, leading a subject team in primary, or a department or a faculty in secondary. And that would be one of them. Another would be leading behavior and culture. So that could be anything from leading sort of homeschool liaison and leading behavior support and well-being and improvement in classroom culture across the school. In secondary, it might traditionally map to something like a head of year or a head of house type role, or leading teacher development. So where you're going to be a mentor, or perhaps work with a team of mentors for beginning teachers or for early career teachers. And these new qualifications now really sort of emphasize the idea that there is no one way that we can move along our careers. And we might say, well, actually, look, I'd like to spend most of my time in the classroom, but I'm really interested in subject, or I'm really interested in pastoral issues, or I'm really interested in well-being, or I'm really interested in developing my colleagues and coaching. And I think that's very exciting. And alongside that, we now have the Chartered College of Teaching, where you can develop yourself by becoming a chartered teacher. And then as a member of the Chartered College who is a chartered teacher, you begin to, again, demonstrate that growth and push yourself and challenge yourself. And then later on, with at least 10 years in the profession, you can then move to become a fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching, like you see in other professions. And all these things are just starting to change the fabric of the way we think about teaching, I think. And it's much less now about, well, you quote, don't progress unless you become a leader. And it's much more now about, well, look, everyone has specialisms and capabilities that they can develop over time and can support other people in lots of different ways. And I think that's really exciting.
I think it's really exciting, and I'm particularly excited about these MPQs. The Teacher Development Trust is involved in the shaping of that, aren't they?
We are, yes. So first of all, we were really delighted to be contributing some advice as the frameworks were written. It's not to say that we wrote them all ourselves, but there was lots of conversation where we were very happy to be asked about, well, what sort of things should we be including when we think about CPD or about staff culture, for example. So lots of things where we were able to contribute. And then we decided that for our organization, we've been working with leaders for a very long time now and trying to help them transform their organizations. So typically the way we used to do that would be mainly through schools joining us as members. And we still do that. But we thought, well, we have so much to share in terms of helping leaders develop and grow. And we have a real point of view that if we want leaders to be the very best for our profession, and all of the adults that work in the schools, as well as the children, we need to be very human. We need to be really focused on communication and relationships and bringing people with you and ensuring that teachers are the agents of change and not the victims of it. And that's the stance we're bringing. And we were just thrilled after a very long and grueling application process to be announced as one of the 9 lead providers. And what that means is 9 organizations are taking these frameworks and turning them into training programs, and then going into agreements with various people around the country to offer their particular version of the training across the country. And TDT is one of those. So we now have 17 organizations who are going to be delivering TDT NPQs across England. And they will be very TDT flavored courses. So built on these government frameworks, but really focused on these very, very human skills, which are our obsession. And in fact, they're not just our obsession in terms of making it work in schools, but we are, again, #joyfully nerdy about it and reading all of the literature you can possibly get about great conversations and about change and change management and building great teams and those sorts of things. So it's a very exciting time, and I'm getting to do even more of what I love by helping this incredible team of course writers to actually create these materials. So yes, we are certainly involved, and I can't wait for next year when the first people are starting these courses from November next year.
That's brilliant. And it is a brilliant sort of antidote, isn't it, for experienced teachers to get involved with a program like this? How do teachers actually manage to become involved with this program?
Well, if they want to get involved in Teacher Development Trust NPQs, then they just go to our website. Actually, go to tdtrust.org. That's a Tango Delta Tango. tdtrust.org/NPQs. That's NPQS. And you can express interest, and then we'll send you some information. But across the 9 providers, if you Google, or other search providers exist, if you search for DFE NPQs, and then look out to make sure you're looking for the NPQs from 2021, you'll see there are 9 providers listed, and you can have a look at all of their websites and sign up for more information there, because there's lots of space for all these different approaches that everyone is taking. But yes, it's really exciting, Freya, and I think I'd love everyone to consider, particularly teachers who are maybe have been in the profession a little less long, and think, well, which is the area that really fascinates me? Which is it leading other teachers? Is it leading my subject or a team of teachers? Is it leading behavior and well-being and culture? And then just think of what it could be like if you're with a whole cohort of other people who are looking to do the same thing and actively trying these ideas out in their schools. And I think that's pretty special. And that'll be quite different, I think, than the old middle leadership, where you could have any really middle role and you could be trying it out with a lot of other people.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I was hearing there was how nice it would be and how nice it is to work with people who aren't within your school to make those connections outside, which is a real strength, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, networking is so key, because the best insights come collectively as a profession and not just within your own school or within your own head. So many people who listen to this will use Twitter or Facebook to connect with other teachers, but actually that's fine. But until you've sort of, seen these people eye to eye, virtually or physically, then you don't necessarily make the same connections. And actually creating these networks and groups who you can then stay in touch with afterwards, and those small moments where you say, hey, listen, you've done this, how are you doing this, tell me, it can make all the difference, can't it, in an incredibly busy school day, week or year. And those networks stay with us for life. Many people you meet on these courses you may stay connected with for the rest of your professional life, and they can be hugely valuable. People get jobs through them. They create incredible connections. They decide to write books with people because of courses they've been on.
Yeah, and I think we've seen the real strength of connection during this period of time, haven't we, with the huge, vast range of online CPD that has really been shaped, and the Teacher Development Trust have been involved in that as well. And I've definitely attended a number of sessions that I've been really, really grateful for and thankful for. But it is about those connections and that seeing things from fresh eyes, as you say, beyond your school might actually reinvigorate you and re-energize you potentially to try something new, try something different.
Absolutely. And no doubt about it. One of the questions I love asking with groups of school leaders is to say, look, I love you being joyfully nerdy, and I love you joining me in reading all of the literature. And then you can say, oh, CPD should be A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. That's fine. But actually, if you think back at the moments that really changed your professional life, they won't necessarily have been the quotes perfect CPD. They may have been one-off moments, or a really difficult challenge, or a book you read that inspired you, and you see how that caused a daisy chain, a domino effect, where that started changing lots of other things, or it was a really meaningful moment or an emotional moment. And we need those. We need connection. We need insight and inspiration. We need time to try things out and be challenged over time. So networking is really important. And I think sometimes people do get, I say this very carefully, people can get carried away with making CPD perfect, because actually it needs to nourish us professionally. But one thing I would always say is it can both nourish us professionally and also help the young people we work with. And that's the joy and delight of thinking about this area. If we design professional learning really effectively, then we can make sure we have a whole school full of people who feel really engaged and excited and love coming to work. And even though it's incredibly professionally demanding, there are those networks of support and the inspiration to keep people going. So that we're helping young people. It's not an either or. You don't have to say, well, we either work people hard or we have to put on yoga sessions. You can't do both. You can do all of them. And one of the greatest delights of my job, Freya, is going to schools where you interview teachers who maybe had previous experiences in schools where they just were thinking, maybe I'll even leave the profession, maybe it doesn't work. And then they'd come to a school with leaders who just get it, and they are thriving. And I've spoken to people who've been in the profession 30 years who said, this is the most exciting period in my life, and I never thought I'd feel this excited about teaching again. I've come alive again. My curiosity is excited. I'm studying again. I'm exploring things again. And that's what we want for everyone. That's what we need for everyone. We can't, we can't make teachers, to coin the phrase I used before, we can't make teachers the victims of school. They need to be the agents of change in school, and we need to feel genuinely like professionals who can make a difference. So yeah, I get very excited about this stuff, as you can tell.
I'm literally doing a whoop whoop here. You can't see me, but I'm doing the whoop whoop. And I think you're so right. And especially even more so our experienced teachers who are real experts in the craft of teaching, and who really need to be celebrated and pushed, but challenged and supported. We have a really great comment in the chat. And the comment is, the problem I find is that some schools don't allow teachers to attend external CPD, which can be limiting professionally. And that's so true, isn't it? And there will be schools who potentially don't buy into these MPQs or don't fund the Chartered Teacher Programme, for example. What can schools do on a day-to-day basis to really celebrate and professionally challenge those experienced teachers if they aren't willing to get involved with external CPD?
Well, so first of all, I'd say two ways of looking at this. Number one, if you're the teacher in that school and saying, well, no one's investing in me, it's not easy, because there should be space in your professional life for that. So I would say, number one, are you able to reach out to things like Facebook and Twitter and join a subject association and join the Chartered College of Teaching and engage in some of those networks? But you may not have time. Your life may be very busy with family or caring commitments or anything else. And so another thing I would say is, if it's really tough for you, don't assume it's the profession. It may well just be the school you're in, and see if you can find a school that does invest more in you, because you're worth it, to coin the phrase. What can schools do? Well, the number one thing we say to schools is, actually, look, you waste probably a lot of your meeting times with administrative briefing. Let's cut out loads of that. Let's see what we can put in an email. Let's make sure teachers have weekly opportunities to come together and reflect and discuss their pedagogy and their curriculum and their assessment. And then over time, you might want to start tweaking your timetable so that you've got perhaps an early close on one day, or excuse me, or we disaggregate insets, or we do various things so that there are regular, ideally weekly sessions where you can come together with your colleagues and work professionally and collaborate. And then there are other things, making sure that there's coaching available and that every teacher gets line management where or every few weeks or ideally every week, they touch base with a line manager who talks about their learning and development and how they're doing and their support. There are so many things to do. And actually, to gratuitously plug another thing, my amazing former TDT colleague, Bridget Clay, I was lucky to write a book with her called Unleashing Great Teaching. And we talked a lot about some of the different strategies schools could use to find time and make time. Even if we repurpose all of the time in the world, teaching will always feel very full and very difficult. And interestingly, even when you go to somewhere like Shanghai, where teachers have much less contact time, they still feel very rushed and very stressed and very overworked. So I don't think we'll ever get away from it feeling like that as a profession, but I do think we can reprioritize what we do. I would say less kind of endless data trawling and analysis, which isn't giving us much, less administrative briefing, less interventions after schools and around schools, and less having to reinvent wheels and replan lessons from scratch endlessly, and less pointless time marking, and spend more of that time professionally collaborating and learning together.
Absolutely. That's the dream, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you as always. I know that you're on a tight time schedule because you're a very busy man.
Well, actually, I just really hope that no one has heard my stomach rumbling in the background. My lovely partner has just made me some incredible food, and I'm sure he's ensuring that it's wafting at me. So that is actually my next job. So
what are you having? Now you've given us that teaser.
I actually think he's made something around the theme of chicken soup, which but with some kind of, I don't know, with a summery vibe. And I don't really know what that means, but I'm looking forward to finding out.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.
Take care.
Take care. Bye. So that was the absolutely incredible David Weston talking to us about how we support experienced teachers, how we keep their enthusiasm, maintain their passion for the profession. And there's some very exciting developments with regard to the new national professional qualifications and the routes that experienced teachers can take, which is really, really exciting. And I might talk about the Chartered College of Teaching a little bit later on. After the news, I'm going to bring in my second guest, Kirsten, and we're going to continue the discussion around supporting and in fostering enthusiasm, passion for the profession with our experienced teachers. So first of all, a news bulletin with Megan Goods.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. New research from the London School of Economics has shown that children born in the summer are being mislabeled as having special educational needs by their primary schools. Using census records for over 6 million children who were in state primary schools over the years 2008 to 2018, Dr. Tammy Campbell found that among children reaching Year 6 in 2018, 16% of autumn-born girls had been attributed SEND support at some point during primary school, compared to 26% of summer-born girls. Similarly, 28% of autumn-born boys were given support, compared to 40% of those born in the summer. Dr. Campbell stated that the study shows how rigid prescriptive expectations not suitable for relatively younger children result in many of these children being denoted with SEND. And then the system that has created these needs cannot or will not meet them. This is because inherently, by the same conditions through which it creates some SEND, it is configured not to serve the children it attributes. It is configured instead to denote children as sufficient, good, meeting standards, expected level, or deficient, not good, not meeting standards, not at the expected level. This, the evidence begins to suggest, may contribute to increasing numbers of children being forced from the mainstream system. Teachers and schools are spending increasing portions of time serving the needs of the centralised assessment and accountability system, delineating children according to its dictates, rather than working with individuals to ensure learning, progress and inclusion. Teaching unions have criticised the government's plan to extend the school day, saying it could do more harm than good. The plan has been drawn up by Sir Kevin Collins, the government's Education Recovery Commissioner, and proposes a minimum 35-hour week and 100 hours of additional schooling. However, opposition from the Treasury could see the plan receive 10 times less funding than originally proposed, meaning the implementation of the proposal could fall short. Education spokespeople have been critical of the plan so far, with concerns over the impact on staff well-being and students feeling they are being punished for circumstances beyond their control. Criticism also centred its role in overseeing the rollout of the extended school day. That was your daily education news briefing.
Introducing Amanda Davey. Amanda is one of the first specialist teacher assessors for dyscalculia in the UK and offers dyscalculia tutoring and bespoke training for schools. With 26 years of teaching and tutoring experience in the UK, Amanda offers specialist online tuition focused on building confidence and developing skills. Amanda also offers online and face-to-face training on dyscalculia for educators, informing practitioners as to how to identify children that may have dyscalculia and how to support them in class. Find out more about Amanda and what she can offer you at www.amanda-davy-dyscalculia.co.uk.
Okay, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my second guest this evening, Kirsten Ryder, who is Head of Business Studies, a consultant and specialist leader of education. Kirsten, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, amazing. I was just having a panic again. It's always a technical panic because I mute people as they come in and then I couldn't unmute you, but we can hear you loud and clear. So that is awesome. First tick done. Thank you for joining me again. It's so lovely to be able to do these shows and connect with lots of practitioners. And it's so lovely that you've come on this evening to talk a little bit more about how we support experienced teachers. Before we start, just again, sort of tell me a little bit more about yourself and your career to date.
Well, I'm probably one of a very small group of people because I started teaching in primary and my degree was primary education. And I did 5 years in teaching year 5 and 6. And I did my MPQH whilst I was in primary education, and then decided, because I was in quite a small village school, to take an opportunity that came up in one of the local secondary schools that had just merged 2 failing schools and 1 non-failing school. And so I then moved up to secondary education, and I've been there ever since. So I've been in secondary 10 years now, and I don't think I'll ever go back, but never say never.
Never say never. And it's amazing to have a practitioner who is both primary and secondary focused. It's lovely. So you've been teaching a while?
Yeah, 15 years I've been teaching, not including obviously the 3 years at university, which feels like it's flashed before my eyes.
So how have you maintained your enthusiasm for teaching over the years?
Well, I think personally, the most important thing to me is building the relationships with the pupils. And I think that every single class that I get, every single child that I teach, I always try to build a relationship with them that is very individual to that child. And I think that that is the main thing that keeps me motivated and enthused about the subject, because no child is ever the same. They're all different. They all need different motivators themselves. And I think that's the key thing really for me.
I think that's a really, really interesting point, because I've been having a lot of discussions recently about being an experienced teacher and, maybe just being a little bit lost with my career or my thinking. And someone said to me actually that although you may not feel the same level of excitement, for the children that you teach, it's the first time that they go through these things. So actually for them, it's super exciting. So it is fundamentally, isn't it, about our relationships with pupils?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important to bear in mind that whilst you may have 2, 3 classes, for me at the moment with being in secondary, in the same year group, those 3 classes will be completely different in terms of personalities, in the way that you have to pitch the lessons, the tone, the sort of approach you take, and the strategies you use. And for me, that variation, we're in a fairly unique profession where no 2 days are ever the same. And it's that sort of constant engagement in difference that really keeps me going.
Absolutely. The different personalities of our pupils, the different way in which they respond to the teaching content that we do. So thinking about experienced teachers, which is the focus obviously for our show today, what opportunities have you been presented with, first of all, and what opportunities do you think there are for experienced teachers generally?
Personally, I've been really, really lucky. In primary education, I was very fortunate to be put onto the MPQH programme fairly early on in my career and supported in doing that, which was brilliant because I felt valued. And I think that's one of the key things really that keep experienced teachers in the profession, is that feeling that you are valued and respected, and you are wanted in the place that you work. So obviously I did the MPQH, but then when I went up to the secondary teaching, I was put onto coaching qualifications where I was identified to support other staff, and we looked at collaborations with other schools. And I was just listening to David beforehand, and he was saying something similar about collaborating. I've also been put on external CPD. I've been allowed to be a consultant for a business essentially, where I could travel around the school. And I think the key thing here really is the fact that if you're in a supportive school who are willing to give you these different opportunities, then you are very, very lucky. Things have changed slightly though since I started teaching, in the fact that there's now the specialist leaders in education, there's that sort of avenue, there's a lot of promotion of pedagogy and looking into different things, obviously retrieval and metacognition. And I think it's those sorts of avenues. And maybe sometimes people feel that they can't develop and stay in the profession because there aren't paid opportunities for promotion. But you can still develop through reading and through qualifications and through responsibilities that might not necessarily be paid ones in a school.
Lovely. There's so much there that I want to sort of unpick with you, if that's okay. What are the benefits of doing a program like the MPQH or the Middle Leader program?
Personally, for me, it gave me a far better insight into the sort of strategic overall part of the position of head teacher, because I was quite narrow-minded in the fact that, it was a fairly easy job to do. I was quite ignorant, I think, in my earlier years of teaching, but it gave me a really overview of the broad and the dynamic position that it is, and the fact that you've got to have this communication with lots of different stakeholders, and you've got to be able to juggle 25 jobs all at once, and somebody's trying to come into the school to give you a quote on this, while there's a parent wanting to see you for that. And it was very much that overview of the intensity of senior leadership and school leadership. So that was the main thing for me with MPQH.
And that sounds really, really good. That is obviously a course that is very much directed in terms of leadership progression. But you also mentioned coaching, which actually I'm a real fan of. I suppose I'm thinking about coaching in relation to what you've said, in terms of one, experienced teachers becoming coaches, but also how beneficial it might be for experienced teachers to also receive coaching, to really consider the opportunities that are in front of them.
Yeah, and from both sides of it, actually, I've experienced different things, because I was put forward to have some coaching about new pedagogy that was coming into place a fair few years ago. And I felt a little bit insulted at the time. And it wasn't until I took part in the coaching that actually I realised that it wasn't necessarily something that I needed to do to improve. It was there to help me. It wasn't an insult. It wasn't suggesting that I couldn't do my job. It was just keeping up with the times. And I've seen that on the flip side of the coin, being a coach as well. And I've come up against some quite abrasive staff who felt the way that I had previously felt. And I think that it's about breaking down those barriers so that staff don't feel threatened by it. Actually, it's not there to suggest that they're incapable. It's just a method of sharing good practice and collaborating and developing resources and trying to see it as more of a positive thing, really, rather than something that's targeting weak practice.
Yeah, what I'm finding really fascinating at the moment is kind of the move. I want to call it a move. I'm not sure if it is a move with coaching. So when I did my training with the I've forgotten who the organization are, but when I did my training for the coaching, it was very much about the emotional investment of teachers, which was great. And I think that actually, if everybody did coaching across the week, we'd have much happier, healthier staff bodies. But we're seeing a lot of talk now about instructional coaching, which is also really interesting. And our work in the classroom, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I lost you for a little bit then, Freya. Could you just repeat what you said, just the last sort of 10 seconds? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you all good.
Oh, good. I lost what you said for 10 seconds about the coaching. Sorry, would you be able to repeat the last 10 seconds?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can now, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So what I was saying is that we've seen really a move with coaching, I feel. It was with Graydon that I did my coaching training. That's who it was with. And it was all about the heart and the head and all of those kind of connections between the head and the heart. And I was saying actually that I feel that everybody would benefit from coaching actually, and a lot of our organizations might be happier and healthier places if everyone received regular coaching from someone. But I'm really interested lately in terms of the move potentially away from that, more into the instructional side of things, which could be really beneficial for practice within the classroom and could really help us focus in on key components of our teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. But I think there needs to be a balance definitely between coaching and obviously the instructional approach. And I think that it also needs to be very school specific, because one method will work really well in one school and not necessarily in the other, because it'll very much depend on the staff that you have and what they prefer and their way of working and the types of children that are in the school or what type of school it is. So I think there's lots of things to take into account, but coaching is definitely beneficial. The biggest issue with that, though, is maybe time, because schools are under so much pressure all of the time to but I know, for example, the exam results for year 11s has taken up so much time outside of teaching hours that there's always something that takes up that time. So it's where do we put the coaching time in? Is it in inset training, or what, where do we put that in? So that's the biggest issue there. But I do feel like instructional is very good approach too, because there are some staff who are low in confidence, and that might just give them sometimes lots of freedom isn't necessarily a good thing for some teachers. So maybe a guide to follow and that instruction is well received.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally it is about, especially when we're thinking about experienced teachers, I think it's about dialogue, isn't it? And just continuing to show a real investment and appreciation for your experienced teachers, and not just leaving them be, because actually what they do in the classroom is strong enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, the dialogue is the thing, because for example, we've just got a new head at our school, and he's been very good with that dialogue. He's obviously having to learn about a lot of new members of staff all at once and take into account lots of new things and what every single member of staff needs and wants and is good at, etc. And I think that dialogue and working out what's best for you, for the individual, for the teachers, is really the way forward.
Yeah, and that goes back to really strong professional development within the school, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the type of leader that you have, one who is willing to try new things and experiment and take into account lots of pedagogy that's out there. Our new head teacher's bought us lots of books and things to develop, and then he's providing time for us to meet and discuss what we're learning from these books. And I think that's the key. It's having somebody who's willing to put those things in place for staff.
Yeah, and you did mention the external CPD and the sort of reading that you can do. And there is a plethora, as you said before, there is a plethora of webinars that you can go to. There's a plethora of books that you can read. I think sometimes it's just narrowing the focus down in terms of what it is that you want to focus on, which could be arrived at through coaching. Tell me a little bit about the SLE role. That's obviously something that people can get involved in as well, and isn't necessarily a leadership position as such, is it?
No, not necessarily. It depends how you wish to be used, I guess, because I had to go through an interview process whereby lots of local schools had a head teacher from each of those schools on a panel, and they asked me about what my areas of expertise were, what experience did I have, why did I feel I was good for this role, what could I bring to the role, the usual sorts of questions. And then in our area in the Northwest, there's sort of a website that schools can go to, and if they feel like they have a particular priority area for the school, they can go onto this website and look for a particular SLE in that area, and then the school invites them into the school to work with a particular department or on a particular area such as behaviour, working with senior leaders or departments. And so it's partly leadership in a sense that you've got to lead in that particular area that you've been brought into the school for. So previously I've been brought into a school to work with an English department on and beyond, all departments in the school, but primarily the English department, on how to engage children with more literacy based activities as opposed to the novels that they'll explore and things like that, and how to make it more fun and engaging. So it just very much depends on what the school who is looking for some support needs.
But a nice array of opportunity and challenge in a role such as that for someone who is quite experienced and quite confident in their own practice.
Yeah, absolutely, because you may have one school who is in a fairly affluent area, then you might have another school that has been 3 merged schools, which I've previously worked in. You may have a school who has a really big number on roll, and then in a school a couple of weeks later that's 200. So that variation is good for you as a practitioner, because you have to adapt, you have to read up, you have to prepare. It involves dialogue with a variety of different people from a variety of different experiences and backgrounds and the numbers of years that they've been teaching. And it's so good to be able, and sometimes I've been able to pinch things from their department. So it's not necessarily I'm going in as an expert. I'm sharing things that have worked well for me, but also I can take things from that too.
That sounds amazing. We've got an amazing question in the chat that's come in for you that says there are a plethora of opportunities available. However, do high leaders take advantage of this? So, for instance, do they take advantage of goodwill, for example, expecting you to do things but without the financial benefit? I guess to what extent is it a mutually, exclusive benefit for this?
Yeah, I think I've been very lucky with leaders that I've worked for, whereby there have been some paid opportunities, but there have also been unpaid opportunities where I've done things out of goodwill, but instead of them being able to pay me, they've been more flexible with things, for example, children's sports days, and allowing you to have to, I don't know, maybe go to an end of year assembly when she's not a little girl anymore, but when she was in year 6, I was able to attend that. So whilst it might not be paid, there have been flexibilities for me personally. However, I am aware that there will be some places where it will be taken advantage of, and the more you give, the more somebody will take. I haven't experienced that personally. I have been in a school whereby opportunities have been restricted because leaders didn't agree with particular aspects of CPD or sharing good practice, whatever that may be, and that was quite a difficult situation to work in. currently I'm in a school that really sort of propel and promote all of that, and they want to engage in new ideas and ideologies, and so I guess the thing is that there are leaders out there that will take advantage of goodwill, and that's unfortunate. And as David was saying before, if you are in a school like that, then you have, you know, you're worth more than that, and you can find another school that is better for you. But I think predominantly most head teachers will, the goodwill you give to them, they will give that back. Oh, I can't hear you at the moment, Freya. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, I don't know if anybody else can hear me. But I'm really pleased you liked that answer. Thank you. Oh, good. I'm glad you can hear me. Well, I won't pretend that I'm an expert on this, because this is the first time I've been on a podcast, but it's really, really nice to get your feedback that you thought that was a good answer, because like I said, this is the first time I've done anything like this. So thank you. It really means a lot. But I don't know where Freya is. You can ask me a question if you like, and I'll try and answer it until Freya comes back. I don't mind doing a bit of thinking on my feet. I'd love to present in the future. I mean, I've done consultancy work all around the country, actually. I've travelled recently, pre-COVID, obviously, up to Scotland. I've been as far as, in fact, further north than Inverness. But I'd love to present if people wanted me to talk or join in with Freya. I'd love to, because I think sharing good practice is the best part of the job. I love working with other professionals. I certainly never profess to be an expert, but I will do anything to help anybody as long as I can. Oh, thank you so much. That's really kind of you to say so. If there's any questions, you can always try and follow me on Twitter. And if you ever want to join any discussions with me, or if you ever want any resources or anything that I can help with, feel free to contact me. How to evaluate students having natural differences. Natural differences in terms of what? So in terms of the way that they learn, in terms of their behaviour, what would you like to, is it how you analyse that and how you deal with that behaviour? Can you just expand a little bit? And I'll try and think of some things to help you if I possibly can. I do really, really pride myself on student relationships, so hopefully I'll be able to help you. Until Freya comes back, obviously. I have tried messaging Freya on Twitter, but she's not answering on Twitter either. In terms of IQ, well, I think there's lots of different assessment procedures, really, and every school has different ones. A school I previously worked in, they test spelling age every single year in secondary school. There are schools who do the same with reading age, every single year. They also do CATS tests at the start of the year. But I think when you are in the classroom in terms of that, I think it's really important to have discussions with pupils aside from just subject specific, because you can get a good understanding of sort of grammar and awareness of the world, things that they're interested in. I think doing that and finding out about those individual children helps them to trust you as well, and to see that you're a real person.